and welcome to season 2 of Adventures in Messaging. I'm your host, Emma Stratton, and today for the first episode of the season, I am super excited to be joined by Indy Sen, VP of Product and Platform Marketing at Matterport. Hey, Indy.
Hey, Emma, nice to see you.
It
Thanks for
is
having
so
me.
Yeah, it is so good to see you in the somewhat flesh. I love following you on LinkedIn and seeing all of the posts that you share. I love kind of your perspective on messaging, another messaging
Thank
fan.
you.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I really love the other day you talked about messaging. You likened messaging to an API. Like messaging should be seen as like an API within a company. And I thought
Yeah.
that was super cool. Could you tell me a bit more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe this is by virtue of having been on working on a lot of technical products in my marketing career, right? And so the inner nerd in me kind of made this analogy a couple of years ago, actually, of all places, when I was at WeWork, when I was trying to describe to my team what good messaging is and how it can be leveraged in an organization, was I was telling them that if done right, it should be something as simple as saying, hey, I need messaging for this, and then it's given back to you, right? And a good product marketing organization, to me, is always a standard bearer for that type of stuff. And if you can have a messaging be as natural and as accessible as an API to the rest of your organization, is basically a multiplier. Like, I think if you think about the best messaging, to me, is something that's clear, concise, and repeatable. And that's something that you could fit on one slide for a product or for a specific audience, or you name it. Like, there's a lot of messaging frameworks out there. But if done right, it's something you could hand over to a team. Like at WeWork, for example, I had my regional manager in India who took a look at a messaging framework that we had for WeWork for Enterprise, and then was able to take a look and be like, oh, this is great because I can localize this one. This one doesn't resonate as much in our market, but these 3 value props really do, and I'm going to take this. And it was something where if you do it right, like, you're just going to send a lot of cycles and time downstream, because ideally it's something that people can kind of ladder up to and really pick what they want and what resonates. And it's also a living and breathing thing. Like APIs also, like, you're always going to end you like endpoints and different things there, and you're going to get better over time. Like, you look at Stripe, you look at Twilio, they've always kind of continuously improved there. And like, I think for me, the way I think about messaging is that's a living and breathing thing. It's certainly something that's canonical, but it's also something where if you've done right, you just put it out there and the rest of your organization can kind of benefit from it. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's where those are my thoughts there.
that's so good. That's amazing. So please may I borrow that? And
Absolutely.
yes, I will definitely quote you on it, but I think it's a really great analogy to help people understand the power and the utility of a messaging strategy in an organization.
Yeah.
So when it comes to great messaging, then what is foundational to good messaging? What comes first in your eyes?
Yeah, it's a question I've gotten a lot lately, just because we're in the throes of it here at Matterport in terms of up-leveling how we want to talk about our products, our overall platform, how all these things come together. We have a lot of talented people who can write some really great messaging and copy and whatnot. But I think it comes back to first principles. To me, the precursor to any good messaging has to be positioning. If you don't align on what your product is, what it does, who it's for, what makes it special, what breaks it from like the pack, you're not going to be able to translate that into messaging that really resonates with your specific audience. So to me, positioning is always a precursor to messaging and has to come first. It's foundational. It's also for me, I've found in my experience that it's also something that's, if you're not aligned on positioning, like, you need to be very quickly, because it's going to be an impediment to you crafting that messaging and going to market. I've also been in areas where it's a great way to kind of make sure that everyone's aligned on what your product or the feature that you're building is for, what it does and whatnot. So it's a great alignment mechanism, and hopefully one that you want to catch early in the game, but then it's an absolute precursor and primitive to messaging.
Yeah. So I like that you bring up alignment because it's hard to align on a message, right? I mean,
Yeah.
let's talk about alignment for a second because it's a huge piece of product marketing, trying to rally an organization around a core message. It's not easy. So, what are your thoughts on kind of alignment and getting people aligned?
Yeah. I think an alignment is it's definitely a shared goal. But when it comes to messaging, I do think that it's the product marketers and the product marketing team to make sure that people are aligned on what we're going to say and how we're going to say it. One of the analogies I remember from my Google days was, I'm a big movie nerd. So the analogy I'll use is that product and engineering comes up with a plot, right, of the movie. But then it's one thing to go from the plot to the actual narrative. And I think
Right.
that's where the marketing team, and specifically product marketing, takes those plot points and delivers like a really compelling story. So one example from the movies is The other day, I don't know if you've seen this. I have young kids, so we took advantage of like HBO Max
Yep.
streaming the Godzilla versus Kong, right?
I haven't seen that. We were
Yeah,
going to watch it last Friday, but we didn't.
yeah. And it's actually a pretty good movie. I like those big monster movies. I grew up with them, and it's so well done. I mean, this is like state of the art effects and whatnot.
Right.
And it's good, clean fun, right? You're not going to go looking for like a Oscar worthy performance, although you do feel for King Kong. He's the one you're rooting for. But where I was going with that is that I was reading the synopsis on HBO Max, two titans clashing, a battle of the decade with unseen forces behind the scenes. So you're like, oh, this is interesting. Yeah, I just thought it was big monsters beating themselves up. But then I looked at that and I saw the movie and I was like, this was actually pretty well executed, because that plot and then the through line with the delivery of the movie was actually pretty well done. And then I thought back, and I'm a big comic book nerd, and I remember being very disappointed with Batman versus Superman a couple of years ago. And you look at the plot point of that, that's exactly the same premise. Two titans who clash for the first time, an epic battle, a duel of the ages, but unseen forces behind the scenes, right? And I had to see the movie a couple of times to realize that, okay, that's kind of what they were going for, but then the execution completely faltered. And I'm like, how is it that they made a movie more emotionally resonant between two giant monsters who don't even speak to each other, where you feel the tension and all of that, and it's an actually much better movie than one where you have these fabled properties for like 80 years going, and where everybody knows Batman, everybody knows Superman, but yet it was not a compelling movie. Right? Or not a compelling story. So going back to messaging and the alignment stuff, even if you have the best idea, but you're not aligned on how you're going to deliver it, that's a huge pain point. And that's one that I think, if I go back to just the examples of product marketing and business messaging, is everyone can start with like a great idea. And it's one thing in the consumer world, you can rest on those laurels alone, right? Like you have something, you blog about it, and people will come, right?
Yeah.
Like people has thrived on that for decades. But in B2B, it's not as easy to say, hey, I have a great product, and believe me, you're going to love it, and you can buy it, you're going to talk to my sales rep and all. That overall wrapper and messaging and execution matters even more. And to me, that's where alignment and good positioning has to be there. One of the mechanisms that I use for positioning is actually this. I'm very fond of Jeffrey Moore's writings. He wrote that book, Crossing the Chasm, a couple of years ago. And he has a positioning framework that I've often referred to in my career, and that I've also given to my team members or cross-functional stakeholders, being like, let's use this positioning statement to kind of write out what we believe our product messaging is or positioning is for this product. I just went through this exercise for our platform on the Matterport side of things just last week, with workshop it with like our engineers, our product managers, and so on. And it's interesting because a lot of people will touch on different things, and they're not wrong. And nobody's right or wrong, right? But I think it's interesting to get those perspectives and get them early, because then you come up with a statement that everyone's comfortable with. So it's like 5 lines, and I don't know if we can maybe put it as like a link in the podcast, but
sure, absolutely.
It's as simple as, for people looking for XYZ, our product is a product that does ABC. Unlike other products in this category, our product is different because of 1, 2, 3. Right? Very easy. Like somebody posted on GitHub. So if you think about how repeatable that is, and you just take that prompt and you fork it and you create your positioning, and it's something that time and over again has helped me knock out some really successful messaging and marketing.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, in workshopping it as a group is a great alignment tool, because it brings it down to just something very crisp that everyone can see, everyone can rally around and understand. And then therefore you can create that messaging that naturally flows from that positioning, rather than, God forbid, creating messaging and trying to retrofit it into a positioning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got it. That's right.
Awesome. Another thing that I love about you, Indy, is that you've got a real passion for the customer in the work that you do. And the customer actually plays a big role in messaging. It's something we chatted about. So tell me a bit about that. What is great about the customer?
Yeah, what I've always enjoyed in my career as a marketer is that you learn so much from talking to your customers, whether it's the customers of like someone who's using Google Docs or Google Sheets, Slides, or Google Workspace, or if it's somebody who's using your developer product. And when I was at Mulesoft, I'd spend a lot of time with those developers to kind of understand, in their words, how they're using our solution. Because as a integration platform middleware, it's a pretty complex product. And the best way you can illustrate it is really through the examples that customers do. So it's one thing to know what you're building. We talked about positioning before and why you're building it, who it's for, but it's very different than to kind of then see what your customer has to say about what you
Right.
do, right? Like you can build something to spec, you can message it to spec, but then what's going to resonate in the market? And I think it's always eye-opening when you get that customer perspective, because sometimes it can be so fresh and so pithy that then you're like, let's inject that directly into our marketing. Let's take that home banner off and replace that copy that we spent like a week on with like copywriters and all, and let's just put that customer quote. And one example for you, one that's always stood out in my mind was, this is a little over 10 years ago when I was at Salesforce. Back then, Salesforce was already a public company, growing like a weed, but I was on the ground floor of the Salesforce platform, the app exchange ecosystem, where we were bringing partners to come and build on our platform and be part of something bigger. And one of the things I remember is we were doing a video with one of our customers and partners who was using Force.com, which was Salesforce's earlier platform as a service offering. And he was like a technical architect, I think, at CA Technologies. And during a video shoot, we can go into video shoots also as a great medium, which I think is always very effective when you get those customer perspectives. But one of the quotes there that just unprompted the guy gave us was saying, Force.com is that robust layer of I don't have to worry about it. And this is a developer, like an architect who sweats the details, has to think about his infrastructure. And when you think about what platform as a service is, in its essence, if you could just explain to your grandma what it is, or somebody else in layperson terms, like Sesame Street simple. It's a robust layer of I don't have to worry about it. I was like, this is gold. It may not resonate for everyone, but for somebody who's shopping around platforms and is like, does it do this? Does it check this list? Does it check that? Having a statement like that is pretty powerful, specifically from someone like of that stature or like that as a reference. And so overnight, I wrote it down. It was in the video. And then at the time we had these Scrum teams. Salesforce was big on agile marketing at the time. And we had to create a landing page for this asset and all that. And I gave them that quote. Our copywriters were like, this is money. Let's use that as a pull-out quote. Let's use it as like banners and all. And the nice thing about that is that not only is it pithy, it goes to the heart of what you're trying to say, but it's also great validation. Of course, you can say my product is great and it's robust. We could have come up with that probably, but to have someone like verbatim say that and it be third-party validation, I think is extremely powerful. So to me, having that customer angle, working it in as when you can, and whether it's like the practitioner, the buyer, the decision maker, right? I think it'd be super valuable.
Yeah, I love that. When I kind of do customer interviews, I always transcribe all the conversations and I highlight phrases that come up because customers will explain it just naturally differently than you. And a lot of it is, it's that idea of the curse of knowledge. So when you're on the inside and you know everything, you have this way of talking about a feature or a benefit, and customers will just like cut to the chase. Just like you said, it'll be so pithy. And you're like, wow, that's brilliant. And they're just like, I'm not weighed down by all the technical knowledge that you have.
It is, yeah, and 100%. And sometimes you'll get really into your inside baseball, and it's for creatures of habit, right?
Right.
You're so used to speaking about your product in a certain way that that's how you're the prism by which you're seeing it. But then getting somebody from the external saying, looking from the outside in and saying, I know one of the examples you used the other day, Emma, which was one of my favorite ones, was when Apple marketed the iPod being like, it's 10,000 songs in your pocket. Or maybe the first one was 1,000.
1,000, right? Yep.
Right? And then you look at how any other MP3 player, I'm old enough to remember those too, like was marketed back in the day, was a 3.5-inch hard drive with like 256 megabyte capacity. So roughly you can, put this much music. And you're like, no, it's just say 10,000 songs.
You lost me.
Yeah. That's all you need, right? Yeah, exactly. So sometimes it'll take either that customer perspective or you putting yourself in the shoes of that customer to say like, you know what? I love how this was built, how fancy it is, how technically advanced it is, but what's in it for the customer? Can I embody,
exactly.
Can I empathize with what they're after, that aspiration that they want, and plug that into my messaging?
Right. Absolutely. Fantastic. It's so good. So I love these stories. You've been at some amazing companies. Like, I'm really impressed. You're just like name dropping all these big companies, and it's super cool. I'm just thinking about all the experiences you've had and kind of the journey your career's taken you. And we've got a lot of product marketers watching this show and a lot of up and coming product marketers. So we'd love to get some of your wisdom. What advice would you give to other product marketers? If you could go back in time and say something to your younger self, what would you like to share?
Yeah, I would say I think this might be applicable to any career. I've been in marketing in the product marketing field for quite some time, and it's a profession that I'm absolutely in love with. There's every day where I'm like learning and also contributing. And I would say this is a piece of advice I got from a early mentor of mine at Salesforce, Jason Garut. I think he's might be at Twilio now. A lot of people kind of go. It's a
All
big
over.
constellation of people. You'll always meet them at some point in your life. But he also went to the same business school as me. And so he kind of gave me a lot of advice early on in my career. And the advice was like, there's a time to learn and a time to earn. And I think early in your career, specifically if you're just trying to teach yourself a new skill set or like a vocation or like a craft, you're going to have to earn your stripes, no doubt. And you have to learn and kind of be that humble sponge, like and have that growth mindset. But at the same time, nobody else is going to look after your career other than you. It's not like in school where you do well on a test and you get the credits, you make the dean's list or that kind of stuff. In real life, it doesn't happen like that. You have to actively groom and design your career and arguably your life also. And I have young kids, so arguably my career might be easier to manage than sometimes my kids. All this to say is that I think there are times where you have to be comfortable and challenge yourself to either learn what you don't know, teach yourself new things, and grit it out. There have been times in my career where I feel like I'm stuck or I'm like stagnating, but at the same time, I'm still learning stuff that's going to be really useful for me down the road. And if you have that end game in sight, be very clear about what your goals are. But I would say the balance of learning and earning, hopefully as you progress in your career, you become better, you're known as like an operator in something and you're good at what you do. So presumably people will come to you and pay you for those skills. And that's something that I think those two vectors are always an area where I'm trying to right size where I am. I've been fortunate in my career to kind of make some good bets or have great people bet on me or me betting on great companies as well, and making those leaps here and there to kind of get to where I am today. And I still feel like I'm from my career point, I'm still aggressively trying to think about how I want to grow. But I think the advice between learning and earning is that if you're in a place where you're learning and earning, that's amazing. There's nothing like that. It's like literally you're being paid to do a job that you love and that you're good at and that kind of thing. But sometimes maybe you take a hit, you're junior in your career and you're more learning and optimizing on learning versus the earning. And that's fine because you have to get the craft. But if you're in an area where you're either earning but not learning or neither earning or learning, then it's almost like that's a tough spot, because then I think you have to really force yourself to ask, why am I still here? And what is keeping me from either learning more or earning more or doing both? And so I think it's a convenient kind of duality, and hopefully it doesn't come off as crass, but it's at the end of the day, it's your career, it's your livelihood. Yeah, you have to do what you're good at and also be recognized for what you do. And I think in my career, there were times where, like at Salesforce, I learned a tremendous amount, but I also had entered that company in an era where they had stopped giving stock grants to anybody. And every day people would look at stock on the rise and I'd be happy for the company, right? But I'm like, I don't have any skin in the game here. Like in terms of that, like I'm still learning tons, and I wouldn't be nowhere in my career without having had that baseline at Salesforce. If you think about marketing and enterprise, definitely one of the best sandboxes for a marketer to be in. But at the same time, I just had my first child. I was like, okay, I need to get to the next level. How do I get there? And that's why then I took opportunistic bets in other areas where I could continue to learn, but where I also have more skin in the game. So I think that's really the advice is be very deliberate about those two avenues, because I think there's room for growth in both, and we naturally would like to optimize for both, but don't settle for one where sometimes you can be making a lot of money, but where you're stagnating. That might be okay for some people. For me, I'm always challenged to give myself a growth mindset. And it's not really fun if you've plateaued out. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And they rhyme. How great is that? That's solid advice that I think, yes, as you said, anyone can take that advice, not just someone in marketing. So that is great. It's super awesome chatting with you, Indy. I've loved everything you've had to say. Thank you for the advice. And yeah, it's been great. And thank you everyone for tuning in for the first episode of season 2. Definitely come and check it out next week for more insights from the wild and wonderful world of leading product marketers.
Amazing. Thank you, Emma. Great chatting.
Thank you.